Greetings, listeners. Welcome to Consulting Between Friends. I'm your host, Michael Holmes Jr. This episode will be our script from previous episodes. This episode will be a tribute to our supporters. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of Consulting Between Friends right after this short break. Everyone is always planning things, and advertising is needed to make it happen. So, if it's personal or business, let Pinpoint Designs and Images solve that problem. With Pinpoint Designs and Images LLC, you will receive quality work and professional service at a great price. The service that is offered: flyers, business cards, programs, invitations, photo books, ad booklets, and much more. Michael Holmes Jr., owner/principal designer of Pinpoint Designs and Images LLC, contact me by email or social media. Email address is pinpointdesignsandImages@gmail.com, and Instagram Pinpoint Designs, and Facebook Pinpoint Designs and Images. We are back. Consulting Between Friends podcast was launched on May 4th. Before the launch of Consulting Between Friends podcast, there was a journey to come to this point. I am about to discuss this journey and give a tribute to the people who helped me get to this place. The beginning of Consulting Between Friends podcast idea came to mind in the summer of 2020, during a time when I had a lot of things on my mind. I basically started to realize that I have a connection with a lot of different people and friends and associates that can help me get to this point with creating a podcast, being informative, being educational, and knowledge to feed your brain, which is very key to me with this podcast. See, I have a lot of talents. I have graphic design skills, computer skills, and organizational skills. When I started doing my research on starting a podcast, I realized what it took was that you basically have to know what topics you want to talk about and how you would like to organize it, and also what it takes to keep it going. With my background, with things I am a part of, and organizations that I'm a part of, I realized this will be possible. So, to make this more possible, I brought in my best friend named Shay Jones, which is also the co host of the show of Consulting Between Friends podcast. See, he is the CEO of Classic Entertainment Group, and we were working on a project together with Classic Entertainment Group in the past. So I realized with his talents from being a producer with Classic Entertainment Group, he would be the perfect fit for running this podcast along with me. We are hardworking people who has a positive mindset when working on different things we are trying to accomplish. When I started this podcast, I knew that I have a background in politics. I have a background in entrepreneurship. I have a background in community organizing. And I have a background in communicating with people for I can understand what is going on around me. So, with all of this, I knew that this podcast idea will work, but it will take a lot of research, which I do have the ability to do research. So when I started doing my research on the podcast, I found like different YouTube videos that caught my attention and companies that does podcasts. So I took this information and I basically reviewed what was needed. But I also started realizing that I would need more assistance to make this possible. One person I connected to get this running that is really giving me all the support that I need right now before this became popular. His name is Ahmad Rashad. Ahmad Rashad is the person connected with on social media before I can start this podcast. See, I needed some direction to get this podcast up and running. And when I was speaking to him, I learned about his company, which is Power 77 Radio, which is a distribution company to start a podcast. When he gave me more information about what his company offers, I realized this would be the right person for me to work with. See, he coaches everyone and he also gives ideas and how to run your podcast. And I started realizing that I needed this to make this happen. See, I had the idea, but I wasn't really sure what it takes to get to this level. And with his company, Power 77 Radio by Ahmad Rashad, he will get you to this place that you need to be to run your podcast. So, if you're looking for a company to start your podcast, look into Ahmad Rashad for Power 77 Radio. Now I'm about to explain this other part of setting up this podcast. The other part of this podcast was a whole lot of research. And I know I had the capable skills to do a lot of research. One research that I realized that was really important when I was looking into it is creating the right logo for the podcast. The reason why this is important for anyone who's starting a podcast is this is what captures the person's attention when they first see the podcast. So, my research was very heavy on this part. I made sure that it stand out, which you can see by the colors, the name of the podcast. The other important thing about this podcast that took some time as well was trying to come up with the right introduction. With the right introduction, you could grab your audience, and that is key. And I was making sure for that. I knew when I was putting this podcast together, I wanted to have some good music to grab the person's attention as well. So that is why I contact my good friend Mark. His DJ name is a DJ name slash. You can Google his name, plus go to Instagram and get more information about him. If you need some music for your podcast or any other catchy tunes. So, once again, a DJ named Slash is the person for the background music of consulting between friends. Coming up with multiple topics take time and effort, which I realized this would be a challenge, but I was willing to accept this challenge. My background as a community organizer and working in the community with the Jeremiah Group and with politics, I knew that I can get all the research that I need to choose different topics. Because with me working with these organizations, I learned what it takes to work hard in achieving your goal. The only way you achieve your goal is if you continue to work very hard on whatever you're working on. So I knew that had to work for this podcast idea. Now, a breakdown of my closest supporters from the total beginning of this podcast and beyond. When you're trying to accomplish something that you are trying to strive at, that you are working on, it takes support from family, friends, and associates, and anyone who else is close to you. So now I am about to let you know who supported me with this podcast journey. First, let's start with family. Family is the first people who are going to support you whatever you're trying to work on. For me, it's my mom and dad and my brother. Their names are Michael Holmes Sr., Kim Holmes, and David Holmes, along with my cousins on both my mother's side of the family and my dad's side of the family, as well my uncles and aunts on both sides of the family, has my support with everything that I achieve in doing. The second family I consider as is the Jones family, which is my best friend Shay's family. My other supporters are friends and coworkers. Is a beloved friend who passed away, and her name is Kashia Peaches Caldwell. For friends is my best friend Rotella and my friend Romalis, as well being my friend. My coworker, Miss Jeanette, my coworker, Leisha, my coworker, Mr. Reginald, my coworker, Miss Janice, my coworker, Cassandra, my coworker, Monique, and my other coworker is Mr. Kinney and Vernell. My coworker, Rochelle. My coworker, Miss Yolanda. My coworker, Miss Vanessa. Business owners that support me are my cousin's name is Jay Ross, and his business name is Exclusive Arts. You can follow his business on Instagram by the name of Tattoo Crazy. My second person who support me is my cousin Alex Holmes, and his business name is The Centerpiece. And you can follow him on Instagram by flowerboy underscore A. The third business that support me is my cousin Charlie Smith, and his business name is C. Smith Productions. You can follow him on Instagram at C. Smith Beats. The third business that support me is my cousin Courtney Williams, and her business is J. Cole Boutique. She can be reached at Facebook at J. Cole Boutique. The fourth business that represent me is my cousin Ronnie. My cousin Ronnie business is Big Boys Barbecue, which can be reached on Facebook at Big Boys Barbecue. My fifth business supporter is Doretha Hooper of La Chic Salon. I also have support from political officials and political friends. One of them is Kyle Green, State Representative of District 83 in Louisiana. Second person is Rodney Lyons, State Representative, District 87 in Louisiana. Longtime political friend is Lunder Woolard, and she's the host of Louisiana Lefty podcast. Here are supported organizations I belong to: the Jeremiah Group and the Health Ministry Group at St. Joseph the Worker Catholic Church. With all the supporters that I have mentioned throughout this episode is a breakdown of how Consulting Between Friends podcast came alive. Now, I am about to let you know the current update about the podcast with the current listeners base. Before I start with the current count to my knowledge of my listeners, I want to thank every one of y'all for tuning in to each episode. I have made sure that I have basically gave some good information that can have y'all all thinking and wondering about things. So once again, thank you for your support with Consulting Between Friends podcast. Now, with all this support from all the listeners around the world, my current downloads right now, to my knowledge, is 218 downloads. Now, how exciting is that? I really enjoy hearing that. So, once again, thank you for downloading Consulting Between Friends on your personal devices. And another thing I want to mention is the listeners count. For right now, to my knowledge, is I have a total of 380 listeners. That's great. 380 listeners are enjoying this show that I have created with my great friend, Shay R. Jones. We have a lot more in store coming to Consulting Between Friends. So stay tuned. In conclusion of this episode, what we have learned is having a podcast takes a lot of effort and time to put it on. You got to have a lot of people that have your support. And with Consulting Between Friends, I have that support and many more. So thank you, listeners, once again for tuning in to Consulting Between Friends and constantly keeping it growing and growing. I really appreciate every bit of it. So once again, thank you. One last thing. Remember to support Black business owners and podcast creators. Thank you for listening to Consulting Between Friends. Consulting Between Friends is available on Google Podcasts and Spotify, as well other platforms that are available. So like and subscribe. Need to contact us and leave us a comment? You can find us on Instagram at Consulting the letter B Friends. Once again, Consulting B Friends on Instagram. And email address is consultingbfriends@gmail.com. Once again, consultingbfriends@gmail.com. Consulting Between Friends. Thanks to everyone for making this possible. Your hosts, Michael Holmes Jr. and Shay R. Jones. The producer and content creator, Michael Holmes Jr. Artwork cover, Michael Holmes Jr. Original music, a DJ name / content distributor, Power 77 Radio.